Hello, my name is Bean and welcome to the 64th edition of Airhacks TV with the first topic, and this is JWT Jotanizer, the next release, or the first reasonable release 003 was released last month, and it comes just with nice output and comes with it just generates formatted JSON config, so it's a little bit nicer. So I'm using JSON-B internally, not JSON-P, and I also recorded a video. And what Jotanizer is, it actually it generates a JSON Web Token, and you can configure which roles and principles you would like to have, and you can send the JSON Web Token to a Java EE microprofile server, and the JSON Web Token is going to be decoded. So your roles become the Java EE roles, and the principal, the Java EE principal. And with Jotanizer, it's really easy to test Java EE security. Now, what also happened last month, I created a Payara Micro S2I builder for OpenShift. So what this is a builder image for Payara Micro, and you can configure Payara Micro with the pre-scripts. So it means pre and post scripts like pre-boot, pre-deploy, post-deploy, and so forth. And it is, of course, it is somehow related to the Payara full image. It is actually just copy and pasted and modified version of it. And so I got some requests about that. So now you have both. You can use Payara Micro or Payara full. So both are usable. And what's actually the added value of that is, if you go to the configuration from Payara, you will see the boot scripts where you can configure the server when you will need it. Let's say you would like to have data sources, queues, whatever. So you can just configure that, and OpenShift will run the script, configure the server, create a Docker image, push the Docker image to the registry, and start your application. So it's like a Docker image with cloud native configuration. Okay, so and the Jotanizer, we talk about that, and a couple of screencasts were recorded, and the first one the first one last month, so it was June the 2nd, and this was a podcast with Gunnar Morling from Red Hat about Debezium and Überjars, Fedjars, and his open source work like Deep Detective and Jacoco and a little bit of Kafka. So I really enjoyed the conversation. So I met Gunnar, I think, 10 years ago in a workshop. So it was nice to have him back. The next one was interesting. It was really nice with Mark Little. He is a CTO from Red Hat, about his road to Java, and about transactions, what transactions are, and then we ended with, of course, Quarkus. So the next one was complete different story. I had a talk with, or a chat with Ben Farrell from Adobe, and he is a huge proponent of web standards, and he thinks that that we don't need frameworks anymore, and he can just go with standards. So we had a talk about his book and Web Components book he wrote for Manning, and Web Components in Action. And there's a discount code, PODAirhacks 19, so you get a discount if you use that for the book. And so I'm not alone. And what's funny, actually, he also proposes similar solution what I did in my online workshop, like using lit HTML and hyper HTML, and he proposes similar. So if you're interested in my online workshops, web components training, and effective web, and I use actually the same without any knowledge. I suggested similar solutions to Ben. I really enjoyed the conversation because Ben comes from complete different angles. So Ben doesn't like, ASCII-based servers. I like the servers. Ben prefers user interfaces. I prefer the servers. But so this was actually a funny conversation with him, because he's actually a JavaScript web developer, and he started with Flash and didn't like C++ and Java. And then also interesting, questions allowed. What should I use? Should I use Payara Micro or Payara Server Full? And because I'm not a Payara you know, I'm not from the Payara company, so I would say, okay, before I will try to answer the question, so let's pick, you know, Steve Milic from actually Payara. He is the founder of Payara, and he had a chat, 1-hour chat about, you know, Payara Micro versus or Payara Full. And what's really interesting, we ended the conversation with you know, the features, unique features of Payara Server, where you can even replace Kubernetes with Payara, which if you're interested, just listen to it. And the very last episode, really enjoyed it as well, with John Klingen, also from Red Hat, but I know John for a long time, and he was one of the GlassFish product managers, and now he works for Red Hat. And we had a conversation, of course, Road to Java, which was quite interesting, and we also ended with Quarkus. So this is a podcast, and the podcast pipeline is full, and it really takes off right now. I got, you know, once a week some ads and sponsorships, you know, suggestions, which are everything rejected so far because I didn't fit, you know, with our lightweight programming model. So now, of course, they are 2 workshops. Of course, building web applications without frameworks. This is actually the theme of the first 2 workshops in November. So the first one is like more or less, you know, the basics, and the second one is more advanced stuff. And I just extending the agenda a lot because I think I can pack more and more stuff into it because the browsers become more compatible. So we need, you know, even less tooling. So now we get more and more content. And also very good news, we have lots of registrations already for the Java EE Cloud workshops, and we have that many that actually I had to rebook all the rooms. Now we have the largest available room on the airport Munich again, where we can actually run with 3 beamers. So we get a 270-degree view with source code, because I usually don't use slides a lot. So you will see, you know, source code all around you. Okay, so now the topics. The first one from actually, I think he is the alumni from Airhacks. I guess so, but because there's also a JAG founder from Turkey at the last Airhacks, and this is the easy one. Which one should we choose, when and why? So there's concurrency management bean and concurrency management type container. Very easy to answer. So if you have at singleton, this only works with javax.ejb singleton. The default is container. So what it means is you get exactly one thread at a time can access the entire instance of the bean. So this is the semantics. If you don't like that behavior, you will have to switch to bean. And bean means multiple threads can access your instance. And of course, the state can be corrupted. So you will have to switch from hash map to concurrent hash map. So if you are, for instance, if you are trying to implement a read-only cache, so then I would propose to use at singleton with concurrency management bean, and then you get, you know, the cache. And with container, it's like you would like to guard the instance. So only one thread at a time can access the instance. And at singleton with bean is very similar, or semantics are very similar to application scoped. And with the difference in application scoped, for instance, at schedule doesn't work, and EJBs, it works. So if you are happy with application scope, then you could use, you know, bean, and if you would like to have additional locking, just use container. So the semantics are very easy to remember because they are exactly the same like at stateless bean. So what at stateless means is like if we have 5 really parallel transactions, we get 5 instances because only one thread at a time can access the instance. And singleton is like stateless with 1 instance. So next one, Alexei Malkovsky. I have a questions about BCE structure and bean validation API. Where should we put custom validators, their annotations, and interfaces with defined validation groups? Should we introduce special validation package and so forth? a very good question, and I will come back to the questions later because it comes in a different flavor again. And the answer is, from my perspective, bean validation belongs, let's say I would like to validate a boundary with, let's say, credit card. So you will have to have credit card validator. Now you have two choices. You can say, okay, is it the credit card validator more associated with the credit card entity, or is it more a boundary? In any case, either you put the credit card validator into a boundary package, control, or entity package. It really depends what you are validating, right? But I wouldn't create a validation package, not necessary, except, you know, your project is about validator. So I got a Twitter once, a message, someone stated, you are saying you don't know any project which uses exceptions as a package, and but microprofile fault tolerance uses exceptions in a package. But if you think about this, exceptions, fault tolerance is all about exceptions. So for me, it is very natural to model exceptions as I know how to call it a true concept, right? And in your case, it's the same. So if you're building a bean validation framework, I would expect to have a validation package. But if you are about, you know, creating payment system, I wouldn't expect validation package. I would more expect packages like payments. I hope it's clear. So in your case, no validation packages. Put your validation, group validation into, for instance, entity, control, or boundary package directly. And if this is cross-cutting validation, like, you know, string not null, which then just put it in the root of the project. So the next one, this is hard to, you know, to decode what's going on, because the question and the image have nothing to do. I hope not, because the question is, please guide me which Java framework should I use to develop online supply chain management system, and can we use JPA for that framework? So this is the question, and the image is like, I don't know, static block initialization with a method call. So I don't get the image, so hopefully it is not your supply chain management system. But first, I don't see anything special with supply chain management system, and I reviewed a couple of them, and JPA worked. I mean, you always get, you know, trouble with JPA at some point of time, or with any ORM system, if you just bluntly rely on the framework. So you will have to understand what's going on. But then, you know, nothing speaks again using JPA, because it is very productive. So I would say if you can, you know, recognize entities in a system, and the entities are entities, I mean concepts like, you know, supplier, supplier and product and stuff like that, then you will probably, you need entities, and you will probably have tables, right? But if you will use you know, NoSQL database, then and use, you know, JSON for storing, so you probably don't need JPA. And what I'm also confused is, can we use JPA for that framework? I don't think you need a framework. I mean, if you build a system as a system, but why you would start with a framework? I would start with the simplest possible use case without a framework. Okay, now, Cement7 asked me how to invalidate caches between multiple microservices. For example, cache some data from microservice B on microservice A. So what you would like to do is to send a message to all microservices, say, look, please invalidate because I changed. So, and then I need, so first, what is your recommendation? My suggestion is to use Kafka. And I think it would be completely wrong, because what Kafka does, it would store events in a persistence file store for weeks or months or forever. And in my eyes, a invalidation message is like event, which should disappear in the next couple of seconds. So you don't, like, you know, to invalidate the service on tomorrow, let's say. It has to happen right now. And then you could use server send events. By the way, I prepared a little bit of code now. So server send events is pretty lightweight solution, and if event get lost. It doesn't have to be persistent. You could use WebSockets for that. It also comes out of the box. And what you could also use if you have just a couple of services is called webhooks with plain JAX-RS. So you don't need any additional component, infrastructure component. And even using MQ, the problem is you will have to run the MQ server somewhere. So I would just use a peer-to-peer event distribution system without a central infrastructure. And if this doesn't work, I would tend to use JMS. And if you already have MQ series in place, just go for it. So just use it. But the problem is, if you would like to use a Kafka, just take a look, what it takes to make to install Kafka and make it production ready. And it should at least dedicate a few weeks just for that task. But if you already have managed Kafka in your company, so someone runs Kafka for you, so then use Kafka. If someone runs a JMS for you, then use JMS. So I would agree, and I would see Kafka as a misused use case. Except, of course, if you would like to use Kafka for replication, not invalidation, this would be a better situation, because you can use Kafka as a data replication bus, because all the events have to arrive. So there will be more like event store. But just for invalidation, I think this will be Kafka misused. So GC Carl. So it actually looks simple. It's really hard to pronounce. Ask me, what is your recommendation if you want to work on OSGi project? So I don't think there are lots of people who really would like to work on OSGi project. I think the question is, if you have to work on OSGi project and you want to minimize your time investment into OSGi. So it means if you have to, so this is, I think what you mean is, you have to use OSGi for unknown reasons, but and you would like to want to minimize your time investment into OSGi, which is a very good strategy, and maximize your time investment into Java EE. So it means you would like to learn Java EE. So for me, it sounds like migration from OSGi to Java EE. What are your options, and which is one best? What are your options, and which one is best for somebody with basic Java EE knowledge? So first, basic Java EE knowledge is the best you can probably get, because if you are a Java EE expert, it's really hard to know not to use Java EE as the holistic framework, and you will end up having 500 annotations on one class, right? So, but OSGi is there for a reason. So what I will look at is, by the way, how to kill OSGi project. This is I think. So I think this could help you. This is 10 years old. I got lots of trouble with it, but now there is no more trouble, because people go away from OSGi. I would say without my intervention, right? and this should be a question, to ask is, for instance, why you have OSGi at all? Which bundles are you using? What would you like, to reload the bundles dynamically or not? Does your all bundles are versioned the same or not? So I think this could be helpful for you. So that if you search for how to kill an OSGi project with 10 questions, and also take a look at the comments, they're really funny. So so if you notice, let's assume you are just using OSGi bundles and all the bundles have the same version, then merge everything together. If the bundles are larger, then a bundle becomes a war. And I assume this is how I would suppose, the migration, like have large, find, the key bundles, migrate them to wars, and everything else becomes just a source code. So it's just, extract the stuff from the OSGi bundle and put it in the war, because the ultimate bundle in Java EE is actually the war. So this is the ultimate module. So the migration would be pretty smooth. And for me, is actually in most cases, most cases means in my world are boring enterprise projects. There is no room for OSGi. And by the way, I'm not alone. So probably not a friend of the show, but Rod Johnson, the server side OSGi, wrote a post because they walked away from OSGi Spring modules in one point of time, and he said why they did it, and I'm also with him in this discussion. So it says OSGi is a great solution for complex applications with stringent modularity requirements. Typical business applications don't have such requirements. This is also my my opinion. But efforts to reduce the complexity, I will just have to deactivate. Yeah. Our efforts to reduce the complexity of writing server-side applications were promising, and the efforts were more complex. So I'm with him. So if you don't even know a need to have OSGi to use bundles, just move away completely from them and migrate bundles to wars, and have a larger application should comprise, let's say, 10 wars, not more. Usually in my projects I get 2 to 5 wars, so it is really hard to find Java projects with 10 wars. Okay, now the next one. Dempile asked me, hi Adam, in order to create multiple services that communicate with each other, I need to introduce a gateway like Netflix Zul. I don't see this. Why? Because we did it before with Docker. So I started with Docker, and there will be Docker network. This is what happens. So every Docker container can be accessed with the container name, and you are basically set. Now I use, not OSGi, OpenShift. And with OpenShift it's even easier. So with OpenShift would be like the load balancer would be here. So the load balancer is the name of the service, and the services are load balanced behind transparently. So or otherwise around in Kubernetes or OpenShift, it is more like you have a pod, a service, which is a pod exposed. You have a Java microservice, which is a pod exposed as a Kubernetes or OpenShift service, which has unique IP address and cluster DNS name. And then this can be, this is already the load balanced version, and this can be exposed via route, which is usually an HTTP route, or so-called ingress, and this is solved. So I never had to use Netflix Zul or API gateway. So I got in projects lots of questions about API gateways 2 years ago, but so far we never had any use cases for that. And what API gateway could solve for you is authentication, authorization, let's say. But usually we use JSON Web Tokens for that. But this could be a job of API gateway, more sophisticated authentication, and also request throttling, for instance. And I think this is another question, because this cannot be related to the gateway, because the next is, I struggle to get deserialize the date from JavaScript date objects to Java using JSONB. So I convert and send it as strings from the client app. Is there a better way to send date objects with specific format without the conversion to string? Yes, there is, because JavaScript date RFC, there is an RFC, and you have to use the same date. It's just 2 ISO string, and this is ISO 8601. And you will have to use the same format. And if you're using the same format, you can easily serialize from JSONB to JavaScript back and forth. And it works because I also using this in project, and probably even date JSON. I wrote a blog post, or I wanted to write a post about that. No. Hopefully here with, but probably not with the client. So, but the key is you will have to use the same format, and the JavaScript date format is standardized, and JSONB comes with date support, so you only have to configure that. Cool. Now, Jumarom asked me, hey Adam, sometimes I find it difficult, and I feel that I don't have consistency when it comes to establishing the price I would charge for a software project. What technique or methodologies do you use in order to estimate that? And after you establish a price, do you follow a defined structure to elaborate the offer? So usually what I usually do is fixed price, more or less, because if you look how I'm working is, this is a lot of lookup, investigations, proof of concepts, and I wouldn't even be sure how to measure the time, because, you know, my investigation goes a little bit, sometimes a little bit deeper. So I cannot charge, you know, my client, I don't know, several days for a trivial stuff, let's say. So the fixed price is more fair because in some cases I'm slower, in some cases I'm faster. But on average, the fixed price, this is what I usually, how it works. So I look at the projects and try to estimate, you know, is it okay for me, this amount of money? And I try also to surprise, you know, my clients a little bit with, if possible, with over delivery. So if you know, I just stick with Java EE and web components, so I actually know what is doable or not. So sometimes I can even, you know, push the envelope a little bit. But so this is, and how to estimate it is really hard. I mean, I'm not a company, so what can happen, you know, in worst case, that I will spend a lot of time for nothing. And this is actually happened a little bit even last year. So I committed to some projects which were really hard to implement, and I actually wasted some money or paid time, but I learned a lot, which was absolutely okay. So yeah, this is, but I'm a freelancer, so I can actually do whatever I like. If I would, you know, harder for me would be if I would be, you know, manager of in a commercial project. So that would be hard to estimate, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not manager. Okay. Now MBDBCDK asked me, when running Payara microserver using microprofile, how do you got implementing authentication for health and metrics programmatically? So what I know is in the Payara full, you can configure that the endpoints, but not programmatically. It is declarative. So programmatically is going to be harder because health and metrics are outside of your projects actually. So the health and metrics endpoints are, you know, one level up, so they don't belong to the project. What you can do, of course, you can have like a plugin for which is Payara specific, but this is not project specific. But this is what I think what you would like to do. You would like to add jars to that. So I will have to investigate that. I cannot tell you out of the. So your solution will be a Payara specific for sure, because you will have to hook into the implementation of the profile. So I will look at the source code of the health metrics in Payara, because health is trivial. So you know, check out the source code from Payara Micro, take a look at the health module and see what they are doing, whether there is a chance to hook in. This is what I would do, because if you're adding this with add jars, it will be Payara specific anyway. So this will be my approach to this. Now, Nakum CSC1, in the AirHacks episode number 14 or so, Makumsi asked me, you know, should we start a Java EE framework, application framework? And I say, if you have time, just do it. If there's demand, you know, it will popularize. If not, it will die. And he created the framework. So now the, you know, call out to all the audiences. Check out his framework, and you can provide feedback whether you like the framework or not. So this is the framework with the Java EE CRUD from Ghulam Samdani. And he also asked me, I cannot, so some of senior Java level programmers sometimes provide suggestions to use Delta Spike for CDI. I never use Delta Spike for CDI for me. So just Entity Manager is good enough. And Delta Spike provides like a, I would say, generic data interface, which you could use. I cannot understand where Apache Delta Spike is necessary for the application code. I also don't. This is the application code from him. Can you provide me explanation why Delta Spike is important over CDI 2? It's not important. So I not use Delta Spike, and I'm happy without. So and actually in some projects I ask the developers to remove Delta Spike from that. Okay. So, and actually I confuse Makum C, it comes later, with this large-scale framework. So sorry for that. And this is the large-scale framework. It is because of the same forum. So I confused both. No, it's the same guy, actually. So I didn't confuse him. I remember his name. So, and he proposed a, this is the Ghulam. This is, and he proposed a 2 years ago or 1 year ago. This was AHEX episode 14. Now we have 60. So it's like more than a year. And he created a framework called TELF. And if you like, just, give it a shot. And this is just give it a shot and try to, to investigate what's going on and give me a feedback. Or give him a feedback and star his solution. So this is what I will do if you like it. But back to Macomc is no delta spike in my projects. So and now someone asked me so now we are over with the official AHEX TV questions, and I thought, okay, we will have some time, so I just copied over some questions from my blog and would like to answer them here because of time. And the question is, what is the main difference between deploy Java if war from Eclipse to JBoss and deploy using WAR? So what WAR does is it just packages everything as a WAR, copies to Whitefly, and Whitefly has like a deployment scanner. It picks up the WAR and deploys that. The question is, I don't know how Eclipse plugin is implemented, but what could happen is that the Eclipse plugin just pings JBoss directly or Whitefly directly and says, pick up the WAR, which would be a little bit faster than my WAT. Okay. Now, SSE Event Source seems to me security does not exist in the SSE client. So the SSE client, so someone asked a question about SSE source, and the SSE client is a regular JAX-OS client, but the what he basically means is that, so you cannot just access, what he probably means is you cannot access the tokens, JWT tokens, but they would be out of, how to call it, out of context. The same if you would like to use WebSockets or HTTP, you also cannot access JSON Web Token from JAX-OS. What you usually would do, you would inject the JSON Web Token with microprofile JSON Web Token JWT, and because SSE event is based on HTTP streaming, I think it should even work with microprofile JSON Web Token. I never tried to combine both, but I think JSON Web Token could work with SSE. And so never tried that in projects. Can messenger class be a stateless EJB? So what is the context? So we have here a EJB, which is messenger. Let's say it's not a EJB, and but he asked, could this be a EJB? And the answer is absolutely, because you would inject an EJB. What you would get injected is the proxy, and the supply async would call the proxy, which could, for instance, start the transaction, start an asynchronous method. And in my cases, most of such classes, the boundaries are actually EJBs. Okay. Next one, Visual Studio Code and versus NetBeans. And this is one of the comments from this blog. And there is somewhere, yeah. Share your thoughts about Visual Studio Code and how you use it. So actually, I don't use a lot of plugins. So I have the Java plugin there, and that's basically it. So whatever you see with Visual Studio Code, there is Java plugin was installed. And I don't like the plugin a lot. The reason is it needs some half a gig of memory. This is the Java language server. But it's very convenient to me just to open Visual Studio Code and edit some stuff. So I'm using less for, let's say, building, more for editing, and yeah, with what it works, watch and deploy works great. So I tend to use Visual Studio Code for demos and presentation, and I spend in commercial projects most of my time still with NetBeans. So for web projects, what I use on Visual Studio Code, I use the lit HTML syntax highlighting, and I have a few plugins for Microsoft Azure and I think Kubernetes, but yeah, this is just for experimentation. And for JavaScript editing, I only have the lit HTML syntax highlighting plugin, or not even lit HTML. There is one, yeah, I think lit HTML plugin. So this is all I use. So pretty much out of the box experience. Okay. So this is also answered. No, this next one is, say I was using pattern. What BC pattern? What package would you where would you house filter class? And this is exactly the same as the bin validation answer. So the question is where to put the filter class, and where I put the filter, I don't even know, probably in boundary. So I would put the filter in boundary, and the HTTP filter also in boundary, because it's a true boundary. This is even more a boundary within JAX-RS. I mean, the filter is uber boundary, because it gets called before the actual boundary gets called. So I would put the filter to boundary. Now, the question is, when are you using Visual Studio Code? So as I said, Visual Studio Code, quick hacks, proof of concepts, task forces, and NetBeans if I have larger projects where I work, more time with a project, then I would just open it with NetBeans. And currently I'm using NetBeans 11, Apache NetBeans 11. Would you consider Apache GlassFish 5.1 production ready? No. And the reason is because Payara is like GlassFish 5.1 plus 500 more bug fixes. So if you would like to use GlassFish 5 in production, use Payara, even open source edition. And why? Because there is no downside. Actually, it's as open source as GlassFish, with the possibility that on demand you can hire the Payara consultants, or you can buy Payara support, which could be actually a good idea in one point of time. But I use Payara everywhere, and I never use I didn't use GlassFish in the last, let's say, 2-3 years, 4 or 5. Yeah, when Oracle canceled the GlassFish support, I actually moved to Payara. And this is the framework, large scale J framework. And now your task to until the 65 episode in 4 weeks is to evaluate the framework and give me feedback. So thank you for watching, and see you, of course, where are my workshops. So one of the workshops in autumn, winter, and winter would be, I really like the winter at the Airport Munich, because we have a nice winter market. And Airhacks FM, so there are a couple of episodes in the queue, so I will push them. Usually, I'm publishing the episodes on Sunday. It's a little bit more quiet, so I can just push them. And there are, I hope, no questions, no. And Ulrich likes Airhacks FM, so good news. And there is also no one in chat this time. So thank you for watching, and see you next month. Bye.